All right, today we are diving into a classic logistics puzzle. We're going to crack the code on how to find the absolute single cheapest way to move things from point A to point B. And we'll do it using a really powerful two-step strategy that combines a super smart start with a perfect finish using two methods called VAM and MODI. Let's get into it.
So it all boils down to this one question. How do businesses figure out the cheapest possible way to get stuff from their factories to their warehouses? Now, it sounds simple, right? But just imagine you've got dozens of factories, hundreds of warehouses, and costs that are changing all the time. Suddenly, finding that one best answer becomes this massive, massive challenge. Okay, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by really defining the problem itself. Then we'll break down the two main phases of the solution. We'll see how they work together as a team, how to handle a common little hiccup, and then we'll tie it all back to why this matters in the real world.
First things first, let's get a real grip on the puzzle we're trying to solve. You can think of it as this constant juggling act between what you have, where it needs to go, and exactly how much it costs to move it. This grid right here, this is our main tool. So over on the left, you've got your sources, think factories, and each one has a certain amount of supply. Then, across the top, you have your destinations, maybe warehouses, and they each have a specific demand. Now, those little numbers inside each box, that's the cost to ship just one item from that specific factory to that specific warehouse. So the whole game is to fill out this grid, meet all the demand without going over your supply, and do it all for the lowest total cost imaginable.
So with a puzzle this complex, where do you even begin? I mean, you need a smart starting point, right? And that's exactly where phase one comes in, using this really clever technique called Vogel's approximation method, or just VAM for short.
The secret sauce to VAM is this idea called penalty cost. It works like this. For any single factory or warehouse, you look at all its possible shipping routes, and you find the two cheapest ones. The difference in price between those two, that's your penalty. You can think of it as the opportunity cost. It's the extra money you'd be forced to pay if your best route suddenly wasn't an option and you had to settle for second best.
And here is the really brilliant part. VAM looks at all those penalties, and it hones in on the row or column with the highest penalty. Now, why would it do that? Because that's the spot where you stand to lose the most money if you make a bad decision. By tackling the biggest potential financial hit first, VAM makes sure you're avoiding costly mistakes right from the very beginning, creating a super efficient initial plan.
The whole process is really systematic. First, you calculate all the penalty costs. Then you find the biggest one. You immediately ship as much as you possibly can along the cheapest route in that row or column. Once that's done, you cross out the row or column you've satisfied. You recalculate the penalties for everything that's left, and you just repeat the process. You just keep going until every last item has been shipped.
Okay, so VAM gives us a really good first draft. But, in logistics, really good isn't quite good enough. We need perfect. And for that, we bring in phase two, optimization, using something called the modified distribution method, or MODI.
See, VAM is awesome at avoiding the big, obvious mistakes, but it doesn't always find every tiny, hidden opportunity to save a little cash. MODI's entire job is to be the detective, to hunt down those last few dollars. But how does it even know where to look?
Well, MODI calculates something called an improvement index for every single route that we are not currently using. Think of it like a cost-saving scanner. If that scanner finds a negative number for one of the empty routes, it's like an alarm bell goes off. It's basically screaming, hey, over here, you can save money by shifting some of your shipments to this route.
So once MODI finds a potential saving, it has to figure out how to actually make that change without, messing up the entire shipping plan. And it does this with a really cool, almost visual trick.
And this image shows that trick perfectly. Starting from that unused square with the potential savings, MODI traces a closed loop, jumping only between other squares that are currently in use. Then it assigns alternating plus and minus signs to the corners of this loop. This path literally shows you how to shift units around. You subtract from the minus squares and you add to the plus squares, which lets you use that cheaper route and brings down the total cost. It's genius.
And MODI doesn't just stop after one little adjustment. As you can see from this flowchart, it's a cycle. It makes a change, and then it immediately recalculates all the improvement indices again. It just keeps searching and looping and rerouting until every single unused route has a positive or a zero index. Only then, at that very moment, do we know for sure we have found the one true optimal solution.
So it's so important to see that VAM and MODI aren't rivals. They're not competing methods at all. They're actually partners.
and together they form this powerful 1-2 punch for optimization.
And what's great about this slide is how clearly it lays out their different jobs. VAM's whole goal is to get you in the right ballpark, and fast, by steering clear of those big, costly mistakes. Modi's goal is to take that good solution and then meticulously, painstakingly refine it until it is absolutely perfect. You can think of VAM as the smart first draft and Modi as the meticulous final edit.
So the crucial takeaway here is the synergy between the two. Because VAM gives Modi such a great head start, the number of loops and adjustments Modi has to do is cut down drastically. And it's this two-phase approach that makes the whole strategy so incredibly efficient.
Now, of course, no system is perfect. Let's talk about a common roadblock that can sometimes pop up during this process. A situation that's called degeneracy.
Degeneracy basically happens when you have too few active shipping routes in your plan. Remember how Modi needs to trace that closed loop through the occupied cells? Well, if there aren't enough occupied cells, it just can't draw the loops it needs to test for savings. The whole optimization process just grinds to a halt. It gets stuck.
But the solution is actually surprisingly elegant. What we do is we add a tiny, almost imaginary shipment, we call it epsilon, to one of those empty cells. This shipment is so small, it's basically zero, so it doesn't actually affect the final cost. But what it does do is act like a little bridge, giving Modi one more occupied cell so it can complete its loops and get the optimization engine running again.
Okay, I know this can all seem a little abstract, but these methods are literally the engine behind some of the largest industries on the planet. Let's connect all this back to why it really, truly matters.
I mean, this is not just textbook theory. Every single day, massive companies in agribusiness, grain distribution, even power generation are using these exact principles. They have to figure out the absolute best way to get grain from a harvest to a silo, fertilizer to a farm, or even electricity from a power plant to a city. For them, saving even a tiny percentage can translate into millions and millions of dollars.
So at the end of the day, this is a really powerful way of thinking about efficiency and finding the best path forward. And it kind of makes you wonder, right? Beyond shipping routes, what's a complex path in your own life? Maybe your weekly schedule, a big project workflow, even your budget that could really benefit from finding a smarter start and a perfect finish.